When you think of a former president, you probably picture a quiet retirement, maybe some book writing. But for John Quincy Adams, losing the presidency wasn't the end of his story. Not even close. It was actually the beginning of his most ferocious and his most important fight. So let's dive into the surprising final crusade of America's sixth president. Now, this wasn't a compliment from a friend. These words were spat out by one of Adams's biggest political enemies, right on the floor of Congress. And it perfectly captures the reputation he built, not as president, but in all the years that came after. So how on earth did he earn a title like that? Well, it all started with a career move that was, let's just say, absolutely unheard of. Right. So after a really bitter defeat for re-election, Adams didn't just go home and fade away. Instead, he ran for Congress. And he won. He went back to Washington, not as the most powerful man in the country, but as a simple representative. I mean, think about that. No ex-president had ever done this. It was seen as a huge step down. But for Adams, it became the perfect stage for his life's most important work. And that work very quickly put him on a collision course with the most powerful political force of the time, the pro-slavery faction in Congress. And their main weapon? It was enforced silence. So what exactly was this gag rule? Well, it was as simple as it was brutal. The abolitionist movement was really picking up steam, and tens of thousands of Americans were sending petitions to Congress demanding an end to slavery. So, in response, Southern congressmen pushed through a rule that said any petition that even mentioned slavery would be instantly tabled. That means ignored. No debate, no discussion, not even read aloud. They were trying to make the entire topic just disappear. And this gets right to the heart of the whole conflict. The gag rule was a direct assault on the First Amendment, specifically that right to petition the government. For John Quincy Adams, this wasn't just about slavery anymore. This was a battle to protect the fundamental rights of all American citizens. From the moment the rule was passed, Adams just refused to obey it. When the Speaker of the House tried to shut him down for trying to present a petition, Adams literally thundered this question across the chamber: "Am I gagged?" Can you imagine? It became his rallying cry. He was not going to be silenced. And this wasn't a one-time thing. For 8 solid years, Adams waged a relentless war of parliamentary procedure. He found all these clever, absolutely infuriating ways to bring up petitions, from women, from free black citizens, and once, in his most famous move, he asked if he could present a petition from enslaved people, which sent the House into a total uproar. He single-handedly made it impossible for them to ignore the issue. His colleagues were furious. They tried to formally censure him, basically publicly shame him into silence. They called him that hellhound of abolition. And the threats? Well, they weren't just political. His fight for free speech put his life in very real danger. I mean, get a load of this. This is a direct quote from one of the many death threats he got. It even came with a picture of a large knife. Adams himself wrote in his diary, "I walk on the edge of a precipice in every step that I take." He knew the risk, and he never, ever backed down. And in the end, he won. After nearly a decade of fighting, a lot of the time completely alone, he had just plain worn down the opposition. The House finally voted to get rid of the gag rule. It was this monumental victory for free speech and a huge blow to the slave power in Congress. But Adams' crusade wasn't just on the House floor. At the age of 73, he took his fight all the way to the highest court in the land, in one of the most famous cases in American history. The whole saga was incredible. You had a group of Africans who had been illegally kidnapped, who revolted and took control of their own slave ship. When they were eventually found in U.S. waters, a huge legal battle started up. The U.S. government actually wanted to send them back to Cuba as property. So abolitionists went looking for help, and they asked John Quincy Adams to argue their case for freedom. Adams's argument was just brilliant. He contended that these people weren't slaves or cargo at all. They were free individuals who had been illegally captured, and because of that, they had every right to use violence to escape their kidnappers. The Supreme Court agreed with him, and the Amistad captives were freed. And by the way, Adams never charged a single penny for his services. Adams's fight would continue right up to the very, very end of his life, which finished in one of the most dramatic scenes in the history of the U.S. Capitol. So picture this. It's February 21st, 1848. The House is voting to honor military officers from the Mexican-American War. Adams saw this war as nothing more than a land grab, a conspiracy,
designed to create more slave states, and he had fought against it with every ounce of his energy.
When the resolution came up for a vote, a wave of ayes filled the chamber. Adams, who was 80 years old at this point, stood up at his desk and shouted a single, defiant word against the whole chorus. No. It would be his final protest.
Just a few moments later, he rose again to address the Speaker of the House, but he faltered. He collapsed, right there on the House floor, suffering a massive stroke. The very chamber where he had waged his greatest battles became the scene of his final stand. He was carried into the Speaker's room, where he lingered for 2 days. His final words were these: "This is the last of Earth, but I am composed." He died inside the U.S. Capitol, literally in the line of duty.
So, why does this incredible second act of his life matter so much today? Well, because it's just a powerful story about what it means to stick to your principles no matter what. In his post-presidential career, Adams wasn't fighting for power or for popularity. Not at all. He was fighting for these core American principles: the right of every citizen to be heard, the absolute necessity of free and open debate, and the idea that the words of the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, had to actually mean something. And all that leaves us with a question that echoes from his time straight to ours. His story forces us to ask, when is it right, when is it necessary, to become the acutest, the astutest, the archest enemy of an injustice, even if you have to stand completely alone?